Welcome to another Apollo Papyrus episode. I am Aaron Apollo Camp. For this episode, my interview guest is the author of 3 series of mystery novels: Pawsitively Organic Mysteries, The Full Moon Mysteries, and the Cate Conte Mysteries. In addition to her work as an author, she is also the host of the Get Writing podcast and a creativity coach. Her name is Liz Mugavero, also known as Cate Conte, and here's my interview with Liz. Liz Mugavero, also known as Cate Conte, welcome to Apollo Papyrus.
Thank you so much for having me.
Why did you decide to write some of your works under the name Liz Mugavero and others under the pen name Cate Conte?
Yeah, great question. It was actually in my case a publisher decision. So my first series was written under my name, Liz Mugavero. And while I was writing that series, my agent came to me with another opportunity from a different publisher, and they wanted a different name. So Cate was born.
How did you get started as a writer?
Oh, how much time do you have? I've always just been, well, first I was a massive reader when I was little. I always wanted to have my nose in a book. It was my favorite thing to do. I had a mother who read to me all the time. So I loved stories. And whenever I had the opportunity, I would make up my own. And then my grandfather was a police detective. And so even though, when he was still working when I was little, I only got to hear very G-rated stories. I was fascinated by his profession. And as I got older, I had my own interest in crime. So I kind of focused on the crime genre for a lot of my reading. And then when I went to grad school, I knew I wanted to focus on writing, even though, my parents along the way had tried to convince me to have a backup plan and become a teacher and all that good stuff. I was adamant that I was going to be an author, and even if I had to do other jobs on the side. So for my graduate degree, I had to write a novel for a thesis, and that was kind of a women's fiction project. But after that book was done and I really, I was done with school, I was a journalist at the time. I was thinking, like, what do I want to write and where do I really want to focus? And mysteries were just the thing. And so I kind of just jumped right into that crime writing community and started to figure it out.
Under your name, Liz Mugavero, you wrote the Pawsitively, that's Pawsitively Organic Mysteries. Without spoiling too much of the series, how many books are in the series, and what is the series as a whole about?
Sure, there's 7 books in that series, and the book follows my main character. Her name is Stan Connor. Stan's a nickname, a nickname for Kristen that she uses to annoy her mother. And she, when the series starts out, she was a, big time corporate girl, kind of living that big city life. And then she loses her job very unceremoniously. And then she kind of realizes that she's not really happy where she is in her life. So she picks up her stuff and packs up her Maine Coon cat, and she moves to this small town and figures she's going to take some time to figure out what she wants to do next. And she had been making food for her cat because he had some intestinal issues. So she kind of developed by accident the reputation of being a pet food chef in the neighborhood. So all the neighborhood animals would come to her door and she would give them treats. And then, of course, she met the hot bartender and he convinced her to start packaging her treats and selling them. And it became a whole business. But in the middle of all of that, she started stumbling on a lot of dead bodies in this very small town. And so this series kind of follows her arc from, figuring out who she is to becoming this kind of part-time gourmet pet food chef to moving into that full-time and developing her own reputation as a younger Angela Lansbury. So,
as Cate Conte, you wrote the Full Moon Mysteries and the Cate Conte Mysteries. Without spoiling too much of either series, how many books are in each series, and what is each series as a whole about?
Sure. So the Cate Conte series is ongoing. Book 8 will be out this summer. And that book is about a woman who, so it's set on a fictional island off the coast of Massachusetts, kind of along the idea of Martha's Vineyard. And my main character comes back to the island. She had been living, out west for a decade after graduating from college. She had a business out there, and she came home for her grandmother's funeral. And there were some problems happening with her grandfather's house, and people were trying to take it from him. And so she ends up jumping in to kind of save the day. In the process of all that, she finds a stray cat who becomes her best friend. His name is Junkyard Johnny, or JJ for short. And she also happens to stumble upon a lot of dead bodies along the way. But she ends up opening a cat cafe on the island to help the rescue. So the animal control team on the island has no rescue to work with. There used to be a rescue on the island that would help, get the adoptable animals adopted out to their forever homes, but that rescue had to close up. So the animal control officer's kind of working on her own, and it was an old friend of Maddie's. So she gets some money to turn her grandfather's house partly into a cat cafe, so she can kind of help get these cats adopted. And she takes that on, and she also finds a lot of dead bodies. And then in the Full Moon Mysteries, there's 3 books in that series, and they follow Violet Mooney, who's in her 30s before she realizes that she's a witch. She knew she had some abilities to read people's auras and help them through crystal healing, but she doesn't really connect that with anything paranormal until her long lost mother swoops back into her life and tells her she's a witch and that her world needs her help. And so she's kind of pulled into both a paranormal mystery that lasts over the 3-book arc, and she's also in the process solving mysteries on the mortal side of the world as well.
What draws you to write mysteries and write? Well, you kind of already mentioned that in a question I asked you earlier. But what draws you to write books featuring cats?
So I've been an animal person my whole life as well. When I created my first series, that was sort of the result of a brainstorm between my agent at the time and I. So I had the opportunity to, so an agent had so I belong to Sisters in Crime, which is a national or an international organization actually that supports writers. And as part of one of the chapters that I was involved in, an agent had approached that chapter president looking for writers to work on proposals with. So she had put the request out to the whole membership. I responded, as did many others, and I ended up getting to have a conversation with this agent. And we came up with this idea based on, what he thought he could sell and what my interests were. We landed on somebody who, makes gourmet pet food. And so once we sold that series, I sort of became known as the cat girl, which was fine because, again, I've done a lot of rescue, and I had a lot of cats and a lot of experience in that world. And so, knowing kind of how it worked, I could tell you that there's never any shortage of crime to write about that could easily come out of the animal rescue world. So when I got the opportunity to write the Cat Cafe series, it was because another editor had approached the same agent and said, I'd love a series that, featured cats. And he said, well, I have just the person for you. So that's kind of how I became the cat girl.
Are you a plotter, a pantser, or a plantser, which is in between a plotter and a pantser, and why?
Yeah, I think that, well, to answer your first question, I'm kind of in between now. I used to be mostly a pantser. But, I kind of found myself writing myself into some corners, and that's kind of difficult to do when you have a deadline and you can't get out of the corner. So I found it much more helpful to have a roadmap to go back to. So I started to learn how to become more of a plotter, even though it doesn't come naturally to me. And your question about why is interesting because I don't think it's something we choose. I think it's something that we inherently are. And I think everyone's on a spectrum of that, right? There are some people that I know who literally plot out every scene of a book before they start writing. And then there are some who don't know anything except maybe the first scene and maybe the last scene. Um, so I think it's a spectrum. I think it's something that people try to force themselves into, one category, and really it's individual to every writer. And I think it's really important for each writer to figure out what they are instead of trying to make themselves be one or the other. Because I did that for a long time and it didn't really work very well for me.
Now, you've hinted a couple of times that your books are traditionally published. Is that true?
Yes.
Okay. How did you get a traditional publishing deal, and what is it like to work with a literary agent?
Yeah. So, I told most of the story. Well, at least it's how I ended up with the agent. So that was a very lucky break after, 10 years of pitching and writing and editing and, creating new things and working on old things and going to conferences and, meeting agents and meeting editors. And, I usually say after 10 years, it kind of happened overnight. So I had this opportunity to meet with this agent, and we developed a proposal that we both felt good about. He was able to sell it, and then we were kind of off and running. Um, sometimes it doesn't happen that way. And so there's a lot of querying involved. There's a lot of finding the right agent for you. I believe that, that's another thing that people have to really focus on, right? It's not just when I was younger and just starting out, it was all about just finding an agent. And now I realize it's about finding the right agent. And so, it's definitely taking the time to understand what each agent's like, what their workload is like, how much time they're able to dedicate to, working with you and nurturing your career, if that's what you want. Different agents work differently. So it really depends on, again, that relationship to tell you how working with an agent is. I've been very fortunate where I've, had a relationship where I could go and talk to my agent and, work on different ideas and get feedback and things like that. So it's really something that you have to focus on and spend a lot of time thinking about and making sure you're getting the right person for you.
In your opinion, what is the most important tool any writer needs in their toolbox?
I think a writer's mindset is the most important thing. And I'll tell you why. So mindset can either, you can be the most talented writer around. And if you just don't have your mind right about how to approach the industry, or how to, keep your career going, it can definitely break you down because we spend so much time on our own. We spend so much time second guessing ourselves. I'll speak for myself. Wondering if we're doing the right thing, letting our inner critic come out and play and stomp all over our work. That if we aren't keeping our mind in a good place and surrounding ourselves with the right kind of community and the people that will lift you up when you need support, and reading the right kinds of things and talking to the people that are going to help you navigate the industry well, it could really be detrimental to both your career and your mental health, honestly.
The next couple of questions I have are about your work as a creativity coach, and I'll start with the basic question: what is a creativity coach, and how can having one help writers?
Yeah, so I love that question. Because this is another, coaching. I think sometimes people think a coach is going to come in and just tell you what to do, right, and give you all of the exact steps you need to make something happen. And coaching, especially creativity coaching, book coaching is a little different. So book coaching, you might be working on a specific manuscript or an idea for a manuscript. Creativity coaching is really about working with someone to hold the space for them to figure out what their work is, how they want to approach their work, give them the mental energy and time to let an idea come to the surface and make sure that it's an idea that they can work with. It's helping them have accountability to just staying on track with getting some work done, whether it's every week or every day or whatever it is. And it's really just nurturing that writer's mind and helping them, also understand every writer is an individual and has an individual process, helping them understand what their process is, why that's okay, and how to make their own brain work for them versus trying to, again, fit themselves into someone else's square box.
How does your creativity coaching services work?
So right now I offer my favorite thing that I do is I have a membership for writers. And in this membership, we have multiple times a week, I should say, we get together and we have group coaching sessions every week. And then we do group writing every week. So meaning we come together, we talk about, each person's goals in their session of what they're going to accomplish. If anyone needs a little support or needs to work out a plot problem or just wants to talk something through, we do that. Then we put on a timer, we turn off our cameras and we write for 25 minutes. Sometimes we do that, 2 sessions one day, depending on what kind of conversations we need to have before. Then we come back on and we, recap how our progress was. And we do that 3 to 4 times a week. Also in the membership, we do master classes. I bring in guest speakers from the writing community from, all different kinds of avenues. So I've had guests on there who teach people how to plot, guests on there who teach people how to, treat their writing as a business. We have writers who come in and just talk about their books. So things like that. And then we do every month, everyone gets a workbook with journal prompts and fiction prompts and ways to structure their writing weeks and just a lot of tools to help people actually focus on their writing. Even if it's, you can just join for 1 25-minute session a week, it's making that time available to people to put it on their calendar and show up for their creativity. And then I also have a digital course on how to write a mystery, which it kind of goes through all of the main points in the framework that people need to create a traditional mystery. And then I also do some private coaching and group coaching as well.
You host the Get Writing podcast, and I just recently followed it on Spotify, by the way. But what can listeners expect from a typical episode of your podcast?
Yeah, thank you for following. I appreciate it. So I really just love to bring in, so some of the episodes are solo, but I have many guests, and I love to bring in a range of writers from self-published to traditional published to hybrid, from, cozy writers to fantasy writers to, everything in between. Like and everybody comes to the table with a different story about how they got published or how they've, made it to where they are. They have different processes. They have different ways of marketing, just different kinds of support networks that they've found helpful. So it's really just to get people aware that there are so many ways, first of all, into publishing today. It's not just a, one path in, and just to give them an idea of the range of writers out there and hopefully some inspiration for, something that they can do with their career that maybe they hadn't thought of yet.
Liz, thank you for appearing on Apollo Papyrus. You were a wonderful guest.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
That was an amazing interview, and I'll include relevant links in the text description of this episode. This is Aaron Apollo Camper reminding y'all to write and read your passion. Bye for now. Remember to subscribe to the Apollo Papyrus YouTube channel at www.youtube.com/@ApolloPapyrus and the Apollo Papyrus Substack newsletter at apollopapyrus.substack.com. Y'all can visit the Apollo Papyrus website at campaaronapollo.wixsite.com/Apollo Papyrus and follow Apollo Papyrus on Threads, Instagram, Facebook, and Tumblr at Apollo Papyrus. Copyright 2024, Aaron Apollo Camp, all rights reserved. This podcast episode is intended for the private listening of our audience. Any reuse or retransmission of this episode without the express written consent of the podcast host is prohibited, except under fair use guidelines. Royalty-free music and sound effects obtained from https://www.zapsplat.com.